take your coffee break with me.
Welcome back to Coffee Break with Candace. We're so glad you're here today. I have another incredible guest, and I'm going to have her introduce herself and tell us more.
Hello, thank you so much, Candace, for having me here. My name is Ruoyun, like Lauren with an R. I am a digital marketing strategist, and over the last 10 years, I've worked with what I call change-making businesses and made of change makers, both as the owners or as the members of their team. And they're just on this goal to help make their community a better place. And what I like to do is give them the space to enhance that human connection that they're building within their community by implementing human-centered marketing and business. And that's currently what I do. And I've done many things in my past life that helps serve this role to be in like a CMO or a director of digital marketing position for them. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
That's a lot, actually. And so can we unpack that and talk about, how you got to this point in your journey?
Oh Lord, it's actually funny that you say that because I just saw a article from Entrepreneur, I think it's Entrepreneur, about how the next generation or CMOs are social media marketers because we have touched every single part of the business, and it's true. We are. So let me get a little bit nerdy because what I am at the core of all that I am is just a huge like human psychology marketing nerd that I am at the end of the day. And so I've been in this business since 2010. So that means I've been in the business since before Facebook even had business pages. And over the last 10 years, it's evolved from at the very beginning trying to create a personal profile for a business page because that was a thing, and doing event marketing in 2010, which is very drastically different than in 2021. And not counting the pandemic that changed event planning overall, but just like in general, just the natural progression of promotions all the way to in 2013 being a GM in a agency that I was a part of, like really sitting in as an interim for them and seeing every single part of the agency from PR to social to biz dev, and really helping clients at all those different levels and thinking in like the full marketing wheel mindset. And then that shifted to starting my own business back in 2015 and with C3 Nami, and it was my second business. In C3 Nami was a digital marketing agency, and we specialized in humanizing the digital marketing experience for our clients. So we did a lot of our tactics and our strategies are around like, okay, well, the core of social is about one human being connecting to another human being. So how do we replicate that for a business, which are living organisms? And how does a business act, walk, and talk like a human? Because again, it is just a living organism and a human built out of many, many different humans that fill that organization. And how to build that out overall. And then that shifted last year into sunsetting the agency because it served its purpose for me to really be a nerd and be in the nitty gritty of exploring that theory of human-centered marketing. And the past year has been around teaching it as a theory of thought in the digital marketing space and really talk about what does that type of relationship and trust mean? And it's now mandatory. Like it used to be, oh, building trust with your customer is just enough to get them through the door. And then I don't have to really worry about it. And that was like very old school marketing because it's transactions and growth and market penetration and very masculine language in that type of conversation. And it shifted to, okay, great. So we need to actually like build trust and actual customer loyalty because if our average spend of a new customer is $600, that's like a car. The moment they walk out of that experience, the perceived value decreases. So how do we get them back through the door again and bring a friend, right? And that all has shifted. And now I just combined all of my many different talents from being a passive event planner, a journalist, PR, biz dev, sales, running an agency, hiring, recruiting, to sit really at the high level strategy for my clients. Most of my clients are businesses that they went into business because they saw a change that needed to be in their industry. And they choose to do it in two forms. There are active change makers and there are passive change makers. Active change makers are what you think of like Ben and Jerry's, where they're like, we want to fight against white supremacy, like very bold, very pushing the envelope. And then there's passive change makers where they're like, I just do good for my business and for my community by doing it. And like, I don't want to try to like talk about it or brag about it or anything like that. I'm just doing it. And that's where they come from. And they really did it because their heart is in their consumer and their customer, their employees, and the overarching community. And they always felt icky about what they hear in that transactional marketing, like hearing the word target audience or hearing the word market penetration just makes them feel like they're losing their soul a little bit in the conversation. And what I do for them is being like, no, you can totally just connect as a human being, because that's the intention of the app itself and social media and the way we communicate today. It just is putting human connection on steroids at this point, right? And it's about knowing the different ways that you can create and content that reflects who you are, that constantly reminds someone to build and come in. And that's the function of social, is to be a crock pot, right? And then that has evolved for me into talking to clients on, okay, cool, so this is social, it's the reflection of your brand, it's a reflection of society. Let's talk about all the other gaps in your business, like how are you taking care of your people, how's your culture showing up, can you supply the demand? Like if I bring you all this increased percentage, do you have the capacity to handle it? And so that's why I've evolved into a more CMO level or head level, because that level of clarity is being able to see how everything connects. That's the longer version of the transition of 10 years of being in this business.
That's pretty amazing. And so you mentioned a background in journalism and some other fields. Did you imagine that all that would bring you forward to this moment where you are now?
It's interesting that you say that, because traditionally we are taught that we have to niche down. We can only do one thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Well, the real question that we're actually being asked of is, why do you do all that you do? Like, who are you, right? And it's a very intimidating concept. It's like that moment from Alice in Wonderland with the caterpillar where they're like, who are you? And you're like, oh, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I do, right? But the reality is, as human beings, we are multi-potentialites. If you are curious, there's a TED Talk on it. And it's the concept that as human beings, we are multivariants. We are equally this position that we are, but we're also a friend, a mother, a sister, a daughter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? We're all of these things. And as human beings, what we're trying to understand of the other person isn't what they do, it's who they are. And it's this light that is inside every single one of us. And it's like an oil lamp is how I like to talk about it. You can turn it up, you can turn it down. It may be like got some smudges on that oil lamp outer area that's like trauma and stuff that's hiding you from willing to shine brightly, as they say. And as human beings, we're trying to understand and see who that light is. And as marketers, what we do for a brand and a light, because the same thing, a brand is a living organism equivalent to a human being, right? Like that is how it works. As marketers, we're trying to get the true understanding of what is that light? What makes that light so warm and inviting and real and just draws other people to us? And how do we build a projector that literally creates the rainbow effect that you see? The rainbow effect being, here's all of your each ray of that rainbow is a way that your brand shows up, whether it's advertising or events or social, et cetera. That's just one ray of a rainbow, but it all points back to that light in that space. And so for me, it was to answer back to like how to like journalism and all the things, the what's that I did to lead into who I am, is that my nerdiness and my light is instigating evolution overall to whoever I talk to. Like my goal is for you to walk away with just a sense of clarity so that you can continue growing yourself, right? And continue doing your thing and being a functional contributing person into our society. It sounds like the most blandest thing in the whole entire world. I'm not a life coach in that case, but my goal in the space is how do all of the things that I've done in my past serve that general purpose, the who that I am. I hope that helps answer.
And I mean, I would say somewhat, because I would wonder, like, did you have these feelings that you have now in this job with everything else you did? Like, was that in your spirit? Did you know you were trying to create evolution, instigate as a journalist, for instance?
I mean, that's part of the self journey experience, right? I was a journalist at 22, like I was really young. So I don't think at 22 I knew who I was. I only know like this purpose that I described today is version 1010, I guess, if you're talking about a brand constantly evolving. Because every individual does that, it is their brand. A brand is a perception of which the living organism is, whether that's a business organization or individual being, right? That's what a brand is. And then for me, I think this purpose that I am able to define today in the clarity that I have, it took version 10,000 to get to that point. And the gut instinct and guidance that I had when I was a journalist and I was young was more around, I want to experience this. I don't think this is my journey in the full, but I want to experience it to serve me in the greater realm, right? Like it's just one of the many things that I do. And if you think about it this way, if you look at some like the top most successful people in the world, they are more than just X. Like look at Oprah. I love Oprah as an example. Everybody knows Oprah as a TV host, and like her pulling stuff out of people in interviews is like gold. But Lady is a business owner. She owns many different things. She has many initiatives, many organizations, many different types of businesses, right? And that's all part to her larger mission overall. And did she know when she was a host that what she owns in the empire that she owns today and the mission that she does today and help people, like you can Google Oprah's mission and it's not Oprah the brand's mission, it's like literally Oprah, this is why I do what I do kind of thing. I don't think she had a clear idea. I think she had an inkling and then she let her gut take over. And I think that's the best way to explain that for someone that's like, wow, that's so cool that you have this clarity. How'd you do it? I'm like, I just had an iteration and I kept using my gut to decide and use wordsmithing in that space. I hope that helped.
No, that's helpful. I
Question.
think it's, probably in some ways for some people, because it's not quite so tangible and they can't write down 5 bullet points, that it would be a little overwhelming because I think sometimes, for people, I've been in that position too, where you're afraid to trust yourself. Where is this going to lead? And so there has to be some degree of openness to be able to do that. I mean, my journey I started as a medical doctor. I'm still a medical doctor, but from there, music, and I'm directing a documentary, and then I do this local TV show. And so the thread for all of those for me is storytelling, is hearing stories, and being able to share those stories with others. So, I can't necessarily do that in my medical practice, but I can listen. But I think the thread for me has always been storytelling. And so I just think it's interesting what you've done with your journey and where you are in your career right now. And it's just it's very fascinating to get to a space like that where you have that level of clarity.
I mean, I'm very lucky in the sense that I have an insane amount of introspective skill, and not everybody has done that. And that's not a con to not have this level of introspection. that I've built over the years. I would say that my level, people are like, well, how did you get your level of introspection? And I was like, oh, just a ton of trauma that I was dealt overall. And it was I either needed to figure out how my brain worked or I would not exist, period. That was my ultimatum, right? And so my ability to gain the skill set and introspection that I have, not only looking at others, but also taking that level and skill set of like, oh, I'm really good at reading other people and helping them find who they are. And that's just like my nerdiness. It makes me excited to do it. It brings me joy. And I'm like, okay, well, let me try it on my own. And it's a very vulnerable place to go, right?
Sure.
To your point, like some people are like, oh, there's that fear that's instilled in that, right? And I didn't do that alone in the process. I am a very high proponent of mental health. I have a therapist. There is no shame in having a therapist because I'm an extroverted processor. And bless my husband's heart and bless my best friend's heart, they cannot be my main person that I rant to.
Sure.
And in order for me to process things, I need to do that. But I also journal every day. Like I extrovertly process and then I journal to like really let it like hone in and sink in and know what's going on in that space. Like I do all of that all at the same time. And it is ways that I have built in habits that I intentionalized in building to better my life, right? So I guess for those that are watching this, it would be more around um if I'm being curious, what do you got to lose, right? Like, what do you have to lose to be curious in introspection in that space? Because owning yourself and pace yourself, right? Like, I don't like that level of clarity is multiple versions because my brain can only handle so much capacity, right? Because there's that clarity, and then you have to build the confidence to be in that space.
That's true. That's very true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think like if I can reflect back to you on what you just said about like your personal journey and storytelling in that space, like doctors are some of the best listeners that I grew up with a family of doctors, and they are the most reflective storytellers that I know. Not just like here's a diagnosis of your body. It's like they look at the psychological implications that makes the body to do it, because our bodies hold all of our stress, all of our trauma, all of our joy. Our body holds it, and like a doctor needs to know that in order to give the correct diagnosis. So you are helping them through their story, and seeing their story and witnessing and holding that story so that they can in turn heal themselves in the physical body, just like how you're telling stories here to hold space for others to shine.
Oh, so
That's just a
true.
quick reflection. Yeah.
Yes. No, I completely agree with you on that. And it's definitely been an interesting, journey for me to pass through all these spaces. And also because as a doctor, in a lot of ways, there's this expectation from people that this is who you are, and that pretty much this is all you'll ever be. Essentially, this is how you'll be identified. So for me, it was allowing myself to explore, and as you mentioned, be curious and say, okay, because there's something within you that you're feeling that this is not all of it. And even at this point in my journey, I feel like there's more. And I'm not sure what that is yet. And I'm excited to see when that time comes. But but in that sense, for me, it's just been interesting, again, to walk through these doors, to be in these spaces and go, oh, okay. Figuring out more myself. Yes.
Yeah, and like that's like the thing, that's the key to happiness there. That's what you just described. Like people are like, what's the key to happiness? And then like a lot of people recognize in this pandemic that the key to happiness isn't material success. It's
Definitely.
not. I like to joke it's not the board game of life where it's like linear and you're doing all these materialistic milestones, etc. It's actually more like a video game, and it's character development, and it's that piece of feeling whole, right? Like seeing and living into your whole self. Like at the end of the day, what matters to you in that space, right? It's not the materialistic gains. And I put this in a very like literal drastic example, but what the pandemic did is that it made people realize that if I only existed in the next 72 hours, because that was how quickly the virus took its death toll in that space, is do I regret my life? And what do I regret? Do I regret not making money or the experiences that comes from it? Like money isn't the end all be all. Money helps you get experiences for sure, but it's also about like being present in that. If can you truly enjoy everything that you have worked so hard to earn if you are constantly worried about the next thing, right? Like there's those
True.
type of moments, and it opens up this like board game of life where people can have its freedom of exploring, you're doing things and you're leveling up your character. And I love that video game analogy because it really hones in this point of like, what's the value of the fanciest sword that can give 9,000 damage if you didn't develop your character and you can only wield 90 damage, right?
Mm.
Like it's that philosophy of life in that space. And a lot of people have that. There's a shifting of conversations that the key to happiness is about feeling fulfilled. And what does that mean to feel fulfilled? It means to feel whole. Like are you actually doing these specific experiences to make that happen? And it's not going on a trip to Greece in the process. Like that's just part of it. What are you doing every single day, right? Like it's not I'll
True.
work hard until I go to Greece. It's like, what are you doing in this exact moment and being present and stuff? And a lot of that is like if you follow mindfulness and yoga, it's something that they talk about, but it's like that grounding. It's not thinking of what you did in the past, not thinking about what you did in the present or in the future. It's about being here in this
Yeah.
moment.
Being present now. I think that, yeah, I do yoga and yeah, absolutely. So, and I will say too, your approach to social, to marketing and social media is not at all what I expected. So,
Really? What did
no,
you expect?
I expected it to be more of, I think, similar in some ways to what I've heard before.
Mm-hmm.
I know we chatted beforehand, but this is more broad, and to me, it totally makes sense. But it's
Mm-hmm.
also for you're dealing with business people, and so who deal in a lot of in concrete. So it's a different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different approach, and I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually funny that you say that because I have some of my clients that are like, some of my most old school clients, they do literally handshaking, taking names, B2B style business. And they're
Mm-hmm.
like, Roaring, I know if I can get in front of someone, I will instantaneously know how to talk to them and get them to come over. And this digital stuff just confuses the heck out of me. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, all it is a reflection of that. So tell me the experience from start to finish that you're creating with this type of relationship. And that's the content that the creative team can build visual representation of. And that's why social is so powerful because it pushes moments of what we call in jargon user generated content. But user generated content is a visual representation of word of mouth. It is literally taking that moment where like you meet up with a friend and you're like, oh, I love your necklace or whatever. And they're like, oh, thanks. It's made by so-and-so. And this is the cool story, et cetera, et cetera. Some person just like put that into a single post. And then instead of that 1-to-1 interaction, it's 1 to 500 because the average reach of an individual's social is 500 people. So for brands, it went from 1-to-1 word of mouth to 1 to 500 word of mouth. And if you get 1,000 of those posts of user generated content, it's instantaneously about 50,000 reach in that number if we just pull it from a numbers perspective, right? And numbers are still part of the game. It's just about how are we reading this data? Are we reading it with the intention of transaction or are we reading it with the intention of relationships? And a lot of people with this post-pandemic mindset where they're like, oh, it's not about materialism. It's like the foundation of which we approach success, love, and fulfillment as society is shifting. And this is stuff that we talk about all the time. My B2B clients that are all relationship based, they were like, oh, I finally get digital. And that's where that rub was, is they only heard the transactional, they never heard that. And I was like, but that's why that's actually where the viability kicks in, is because you're shuffling past another person in a very packed digital networking room. And if you nail that connection point, the next person that will come to you will have heard that conversation and get so excited that they're talking to you. So you have an easier conversation with them and it's deeper. Like, that's the viability that people talk about.
That's amazing. No, that is so awesome. And again, I think in all this time, I've never heard anybody explain it quite that way. And yet it makes the most sense of anything I've heard related to social media.
Yeah, I get that a lot. And I'm like, but that's just how it works. Yeah. Like,
but you make it sound
you
make it sound so natural. Like it sounds like air. Like it just is that natural when you talk about it. So
thank you.
I love that.
I'll try not to be an awkward turtle in the process. I fall in the category of a passive change maker, is what I fall in the category. So when people are like, that's so cool, and I'm like, thanks.
Oh. Oh, so I know we're in the present, in the moment. You're doing all this amazing work with your clients. And so have you thought about what's next for you?
So it's actually funny that you say that. I've been invited to sit on a couple of universities. I sit on a couple of universities. I sit on one university board for another conversation, and I've been in the talks of considering going back into academia.
Really?
And that was always my longer journey. My longer journey overall has been setting standards in the digital marketing realm, because I've been there since the beginning, and I'm really tired of having to deal with just bad actors that cause trauma on my clients. Like, I'm a mama bear through and through. Like, my team in my agency one year gave me a mug that literally says mom on it, because I am a mama bear. And I do that for clients. Like, I get very sassy and go like, excuse me. Oh, like, no, you can do this, you could do you can have things, right? Like, and that was what I wanted. I was like, I would really love for standards to be set in this industry around it, so that business owners are less traumatized, and then also marketers are less traumatized, right? Like, marketers in my day and arena, we were just told to just go and do it, figure it out in that space, because nobody else did it. And it's like, we can totally set better standards for the next generation of marketers.